Welcome to Module 3 of the Shaping Human Systems course. This is Part 2, Changing Dysfunctional Teams.
All right, Michael, let's talk about dysfunctional teams. We've all heard so much about dysfunctional teams and how to fix them. How do you know? Let's start in a different place. How do you know when a team is dysfunctional?
Actually, that's pretty easy. It's like when a team or meeting isn't getting its work done and people are not feeling engaged and don't want to be there.
Okay, that covers a lot there.
It does. It does. Right. It's pretty simple when people know when they've hit that wall.
Yep. So let's talk about how you turn dysfunctional teams into functional teams.
Okay, we got 5 steps here, folks. Number 1, develop the support you need. 2, accept that you have been part of the dysfunction. Not easy. 3, acknowledge to your group your shortcomings and the group's shortcomings. 4, level the power dynamics. 5, build consensus around the changes needed. That's all there is to it. Piece of cake, huh, Ronnie?
This is easy said, harder done. So let's talk about each of these 5 steps in the context of an example. Of course, with 40 years of practice, I'm sure you have a ton of them. Do you have a story of like a human systems change that you can share with us, Michael?
I do, and we'll go through it step by step, following the 4 points that we just covered. We'll use the story. There were 5 points that we just covered. Arithmetic was never a strong suit of mine. I was great at mathematics, though, but not arithmetic.
Noted. Let's continue.
Okay, so we'll use the story of Bill James and his team. He is the COO of a high-tech outfit in the Midwest. He had a team of 8 executives that covered a host of varying products and services. Now, 5 of the 8 executives had been with Bill for 7 years or more. The other 3 had only been there for 6 months to 18 months. And hostility between the new folks and the old groups had become more and more a problem and getting in the way of the easy teamwork that Bill liked very much and thought that was highly productive. He tried everything he knew how to get them working well together. He asked them to stop bickering. He ordered them to stop. Once he got so frustrated that he would just end the meeting and walked out before he said something rash. So they were a mess.
Yeah, that does sound like a mess. Like they had a lot of deep divisions. It actually sounds like when I'm together with my family sometimes when I was a kid, the bickering, the fighting, and my mother would eventually just walk out of the room. So, but we're not talking about families. We're talking about teams and organizations. So what did he do with this dysfunctional team? What's the next thing that he did?
Yeah, I'm actually glad that you brought up about your family, because keep in mind that families, like teams at work, are just human systems with all of the same rigmarole that we tend to go through if we don't understand them as human systems. Okay. First thing that Bill did, well, I won't say it's the first thing because it took him 6 months to get to step number 1. He needed to develop support for the change that he needed. He did not know how to do it by himself. Now, support does not need to be an external consultant like me, but it does need to be someone that you trust and respect. It could even be a team member. Could be somebody from a different company, but it does need to be somebody that you trust and respect. You need someone who will help you think through a change process and support you with your own conscious use of self and your own ego. I cannot emphasize enough the need to use support when you are wanting to change the dynamics of human systems. This topic is so important that we will have a whole course just on creating support you need for success. It is actually the next course. Do not miss it.
All right. Step 1, do not go it alone when you're trying to fix a dysfunctional system. Get the support you need.
Okay. So Bill had no one that he could think of. So he thought of me. I had met him casually several years ago, and he gave me a call. I said, okay, sure, I'm willing to help you out. My first step, as always, is to get a handle on what are the systemic issues here, not just who are the problem people. I do that through interviewing everyone on Bill's team and noting the issues that I hear repeated at least 50% of the time. That is not a hard and fast number. If an issue is mentioned 40% of the time and I judge it's important to be sufficient, I will deem it a systemic issue. As Bill said, he was right on target. There was a clear divide between his old folks and new folks. The new folks felt that any idea they brought up was discounted for their lack of experience in the company, and the folks who had been there forever felt that the new folks wanted to discard their hard-won experience. Both felt disrespected by the other. That's one thing they were all in agreement about. Bill said that he needed their differences for the creativity that diversity can yield if they just got along well. But they certainly hadn't gotten there yet.
Okay. So that was great. I mean, so you as a member of a support system, you asked some really hard questions. You got some sound and current data. So I think support systems, just so people are clear, is not just about, hey, I'm bolstering you, but just really supporting you in specific ways around how do we, is it real? And how do we get to that? What's real and how can we help you change?
Super. Ready for step 2?
Yeah, and so what did you do in step 2 with Bill?
Step 2 is accept that you have been part of the dysfunction. I asked Bill what he would like to learn from this experience in working with me. He readily shared that he would love to learn how to resolve such conflicts without having to spend money on such folks as me. We are not cheap. Great, I said to him. Then I asked him what his role in the problem is. He kind of looked at me and said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, for things to be the way they are, and it's your team, aren't you part of the problem? He looked at me again and said, are you blaming me for this problem? I said, no, but I'm pretty sure that you contributed to it. He looked at me for a long, hard minute and said, what's your point? I said that you can't see how you contributed to the problem. You will have a very hard time learning, 1, how to prevent such problems in the future, and 2, you will not be able to fix them. You will be able to change, your group will be able to change only if you change. You've made the first step in asking for help with something that you didn't know how to do. Notice that if you knew how to do it, that you would have done it. So that's a change all by itself. He nodded and said, I think I see what you're telling me, that until I see myself as part of the problem, that I really can't solve it. I think I need to sleep on that. So.
All right. So Bill first had to get the support that he needed, which included you, and you asked him some hard questions, got some data, and he had to do the really important step of acknowledging that he's a part of the system. He's a part of the problem. And I think that's the hardest thing to do, is see that you're part of the thing that you're complaining about. And a lot of organizations I've been in, a lot of people that I've been with, we spend all this time complaining about, they don't do this, they don't do that. We never acknowledge that we are part of the they. So, we are part of the problem. And I think that's really, really important.
Thank you for reminding us from Module 2. We talked in depth about for a system to be the way it is Everybody in that system is doing something to contribute to it, and that means you. Now, that conversation was not easy for Bill. He did sleep on it, and when we met again, he said he talked it through with his wife, which is actually more support. And his wife said that if something that he's a part of isn't working, that he was part of it not working. She used the analogy of their relationship, that they both make it work or they both have failed. In this case, Bill actually got the support of two people, me and his wife, to get past our first step, our second step, number 2.
Right. So so how to create change in human systems is you have to develop support, and you have to acknowledge that you're a part of the problem. So then what happened?
Well, now he's ready for our third step. The third step is acknowledge shortcomings. That means acknowledging the team's shortcomings and that you have been part of the problem. Once past owning that he was part of the problem, Bill was more than willing to be candid, forthright, and open about the problem and his part in it with his team. That was actually his more natural style. At this point, I was impressed with Bill, and it was looking like he didn't have much ego involved at all, which is good news for me. Good news for him, too.
Okay, so number 3, he had an open conversation with his team about the shortcoming after he acknowledged it and after he got support around it. So that's important third step. Talk about it. Then what?
Step 4 is leveling the power dynamics. There's always a power dynamic between boss and subordinates, leader and follower. We need to level the playing field. The way Bill did that with my coaching was to ask his team what he could do to improve his leadership. The point here was not so much just to get the feedback, but also to create an open and honest atmosphere where everyone feels free to speak truth to power. When the person in power asks for help with their shortcomings, that's that person bringing themselves down to being just a human being like everyone else. Now, I'm clear that admitting fallibility isn't easy for anyone, and it could be particularly difficult for leaders. Our egos really don't want to go there. Bill had already done some work on his ego as we talk, so this step was a little easier than it can be for many. Easier or not, it is a vital step that sets the stage for the openness from subordinates who might not feel safe to be open with their boss.
So, Michael, I love that phrase. I love the phrase, speak truth to power. So, and this is what we're talking about when we talk about leveling power dynamics. It's like, I have to feel safe enough on this team in order to tell you what's going wrong. So that's about leveling the power dynamics, which is step 4 in the process. And we did talk about ego and our conscious use of self, course. So that's a great reminder of that. So let's talk about that final step, step 5.
Yes. Step 5, build consensus around the changes needed. Now, this is actually going to bring us back to step 4, but in a little different way. Bill had done a good job of being curious, interested, and appreciative of every point his team made about his leadership. Now it was time for him to respond by negotiating with them for what he wanted in relationship to what they wanted from him. Now, in this case, both the new and the older folks had asked Bill to take a side when the arguments would start. Interesting. Now, they also said that they would go along with whatever he decided, even if his decision went against them, but at least it would settle the issue. And Bill said, absolutely not. It will not solve the problem of us working well together and getting this sense of creativity and synergy that can come out of us working well together. Me making final decisions will not take us there, and I don't want to go there. He also said that he understood that they didn't seem to know how to do that, and if they're willing to put aside their differences, that we could help them get there, because we've got a great exercise for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. It's like the team wanted Bill to make the decision because they didn't want to take responsibility and accountability for what happened, so they could have the permission to keep misbehaving, right? So that was a really interesting point.
Keep misbehaving and keep blaming other people, and so keep up with their energy sponging.
Yeah, I'm not the problem. They're the problem.
Amen.
So was there any resistance to this sort of shift that Bill was proposing on his team, given the amount of time that had gone by, the hostility that had been going on at that point?
Well, there actually was a good bit of hostility about this new idea, because they really didn't know how to do it. Both sides knew that they were absolutely right, and the other side was absolutely wrong, which in essence was another power dynamic that needed to be leveled. If I think I'm right, I'm up here, and I think you're down there. And if you think you're right, then you're up here and you've got me down there. So we needed to level the playing field again, this time not between Bill and his team, but between the two sides of this who's right and who's wrong question. Have an exercise called the Big Share. The Big Share consists of a series of 7 or 8 questions where each person answers each question one after the other without being interrupted. Now, these questions are in a PDF that is attached to this a module. If you've not looked at it already, don't hesitate to do so. Now, the exercise for this size group, which is around 12, 13 people, can take up to 2 to 3 hours, but is well worth the time. It supports the sharing of personal stories and the vulnerability, and the sharing of which creates trust. Peace winds up being restored as each person sees the others as human beings like themselves, rather than an age group or role, a label, or an enemy. Now they can begin to hear each other where they couldn't before. The impact on the team from such an exercise is profound, as new norms of listening and interpersonal appreciation are established.
That's great. I mean, in those moments, I think it's really important when a team is first established as well to really talk about each other and get to know each other on a human and personal level, because it makes all the difference in the world in working together, because you understand where people are coming from. So how does this Big Share establish these group norms that we talked about or we mentioned?
Group norms are established when behaviors become consistent across a critical mass of a human system. The exercise has each member of the group repeatedly share with some level of vulnerability, and has each member listen to each other without interruption repeatedly, and everyone is doing it. So we have a great critical mass here. Some think the norms are set by putting a list of norms, a list of desired behaviors on a piece of paper up on the wall. That those lists make no difference, although they can be useful as reminders. It is the actual doing of those behaviors that makes the difference. That's what the big share does. It gets people behaving in ways that support listening and sharing themselves. From the big share, the group found it easier to let the past go and to entertain the possibility of a new start. From there, they actually developed consensus where they came to agreement around 6 behaviors that they thought would turn them into a highly productive and engaging team, which at this point, they were actually behaving that way. The list included the things that need to be done to create a healthy team in the first place, the things we talked about in the first take of this third module. Interestingly enough, they also developed consensus around how they would support and hold each other accountable for getting back on track whenever necessary.
Mm-hmm. That's a really great example, Michael, of how a big share can really impact the dynamic of a team, of a human system. I think what it reminds me a lot of is how these kinds of sharings can really create a very strong sense of belonging to the system, and respect for each other as humans. So, yeah, big share is pretty important. Get to know each other on a personal level. And like we said before, it's good to do it at the beginning of every meeting, making sure, and it can be very quick. How are you doing today? Whatever it is, a quick check-in of every member of the team is, I think, important to kind of keep that maintenance of a healthy team going. So we covered these 5 steps. Let's just recap them for everyone. We talked a lot about the big share, which is a part of sort of that whole, maintenance that happens as a part of getting a sort of dysfunctional team into a healthy team environment as you start sharing with one another. We started by, if you as a leader are dealing with a dysfunctional team, the first thing you need to do is get support. So get a support system in place, someone who'll be kind of asking you critical questions about what's really going on. Second point is acknowledging that you're a part of the problem, right? You're a part of the system. You're a part of the team. The third thing is to discuss that openly with your team about what's working, what's not working. And the fourth thing is, I love that phrase, speaking truth to power, leveraging those power dynamics by enabling people to be able to speak truth to power and say, this is what I'm feeling. Kind of levels things out a little bit. And the fifth thing is building consensus on the team about what's working, what's not working, and how do we move forward. And one of the techniques for sort of getting to that point of building consensus is sharing, is the big share, sharing personal information about each other with each other. Does that sum it up, Michael?
Yeah. Just the final word about the big share, that a lot of people, when they see this questions, go, that's getting too personal, and this is at work, and we don't share all that at work. But once they get started, they absolutely love it.
Okay.
Though, do not attempt to do a big share with your group without your leader being on board.
Absolutely. So, just a question. As the formal leader of a team, as I'm the leader of a team, I might find it a little easier to do some of these things because I have the authority. But what if I'm a team member and I don't have the authority? How do I push for change or institute change in a dysfunctional team?
Well, what you need to do, first of all, is not attempt to change a dysfunctional human system by yourself. The risk can be too high. So what you really want to do is have a conversation with the leader of the team to see if he or she is seeing the same group as dysfunctional as you do. Chances are the leader is wondering too, what can be done? If so, you've got some suggestions for him or her. First one, raise the issue with the group, and it's helpful if the leader leads this process to see if others are having a similar experience. If the two of you already are there, I bet you a dime to a dollar, then lots of people are having the same experience. Number two, discuss and establish a consensus around what norms they would like to work from, just as we did with Bill's team. And number three, critically important, establish accountability and consequences for behaving and not behaving according to what has been decided. Remember, the norms are only set through how a critical mass of the group is actually behaving. A list is just a list of desires that can no more do anything than serve as a reminder. Now, if having such a conversation with the boss even seems risky, recruit a couple buddies that are on the team who are thinking the same way you are to go with you to talk to the boss. You may need your support system just to talk to gain the boss's support. The entire idea of support is just so very important. No one has ever accomplished anything of any significance by themselves. We've mentioned this in Module 2 of this course, and support systems are so important that it is the topic for the next course as well.
Okay, so if I'm not the formal leader of a team, if I'm not the team leader, it's like big disclaimer, get support. Get support, and talk to your leader about, sort of three general things. Do others see the dysfunction? Ask the leader to investigate that. Help the leader think through how you establish consensus around norms and how do you establish accountability. Whew, that's a lot of stuff to do, Michael.
Well, creating powerful human systems and being the kind of powerful leader that can do that is not easy, run-of-the-mill stuff.
Yeah.
It takes work. It takes conscious attention to yourself. I mean, just this whole idea of support is so important. So many of us, particularly the mavericks of the world, are just automatic about trying to do everything and change everything by themselves. And it's like beating your head up against a brick wall. But then, of course, you want to blame the brick wall for it.
Brick walls are always blamable.
Yeah, of course. But it's very useful.
So so what I heard you say is, big disclaimer, do not try this by yourself. Get the support that you need if you're not the leader of a team. The first thing you need to do is talk to your leader and see if you're afraid to talk to your leader, get a couple of your buddies with you to talk to your leader. Get that support. See and ask the leader, do they see this dysfunction? Have they what do they think about establishing some norms around group behavior? And how would they go about establishing accountability? So you get your leader to start thinking about these things. And that's the way an informal leader would go about this. Is that about right?
You got it. Trying to go it alone just doesn't work very well.
All right.
Too much risk.
So let's just close this module out and talk about those 5 steps for fixing dysfunctional human systems. Number 1, get support or develop the support system that you need to sort of really ask the hard questions to help you think through the change you need to make. Number 2, acknowledge that you're a part of the problem, that you're a part of the human system you're trying to change. So therefore, you are a part of that dynamic and you're a part of that problem. And that's, goes back to conscious use of self. Number 3, discuss it openly with your team about the problems they see and all the potential solutions and getting buy-in around norms and consensus. So that's really important. Address power dynamics. Make it safe for your team members to speak truth to power, which is you, if you're the leader. How to, just kind of level that playing field, make it open, that sort of open candor we talked about in functional teams. And I think the fifth thing you said is about building consensus and agreements around those group norms and all those other things that you need to do to have a healthy team. And that's how you go about fixing those dysfunctional teams. Any closing thoughts before we move on to the exercise, Michael?
I think you did a great job of summarizing everything that we've talked about. Yes.
Great. Let's take a pause and do the exercise.